This is Pukeology Podcast, where science meets your hilarious puke stories and the tips and tricks to stop that up-chuckle that you need.
You never know what's going to spew out of her mouth. Here's
my mama,
Dr. Pukeology.
Are you a pregnant planner like me, and you can't wait to decorate the baby's room in either pink or blue? So you want to find out right now what you're having, or you're just waiting for the perfect gender reveal party time to send out on the invitation. Well, this Pregnancy Pukeology Podcast, episode 50, is perfect for you because you will find out when to find out the sex of the baby. If you want no more morning sickness, pregnancy nausea, or how about no more second trimester headaches or migraines, visit our sponsor, nomonausea.com, the only natural way to instantly stop your worst nausea, vomiting, or headaches now. Or just place your No More Nausea ban on your baby registry for your delivery bag at Bye Bye Baby, or get it shipped for free in just 2 days on Amazon as a Prime vendor. And know your little ones are always taken care of with the first No More Nausea Kids and No More Sleepless Nights Kids ban. Imagine how amazing that would be if your kids slept through the night the whole time. Well, No More Sleepless Nights have you covered. And if you're a mama with small wrist, it is also available at your local CVS store right now. Go pick one up. Pregnancy humor that you'll hear that may just make you want to pee your pants, like you don't have to pee all the time anyway, with hilarious puke stories like blew my Cheerios, T and P, or Bush Please. If you want to learn more about your pregnancy, humor and knowledge is the key to help you survive these 9 months. And just know we're in this together. Today, you will learn the science behind when do you find out the sex of the baby with the 4 most current technologies that medicine has to offer. How accurate is the Chinese conception chart, and the science behind some old wives' tales that can tell you the signs and symptoms if you're having a boy or girl in early pregnancy. All this in today's Pregnancy Pukeology Podcast, episode 50, When Do You Find Out the Sex of the Baby?
The science of puke, pukeology.
So everyone always wants to know, when do you find out the sex of the baby? Well, it's not as easy as everybody thinks. While various factors can help you predict the gender of your baby, such as Chinese conception calendar, which if you ever want to take a look at it, just go to our blog and you can actually see this, nomonausea.com/blog/health and wellness. We'll go into a lot more detail of this in just a bit, but there's also some old wives' tales about whether you're having a boy versus a girl, the way that your stomach is, whether it's poked out or whether it's round, or whether or not you have morning sickness or not. But only a doctor like myself can reliably find out the sex of your baby through one of these 4 medically proven ways. So how soon can you find out the sex of your baby? There are various tests that can help doctors find out the sex of the baby that you have, but there is no single test that applies to every single expectant mother. So your doctor can certainly do these tests depending upon the stage of your pregnancy. While some tests can determine the sex of your baby earlier in pregnancy, the results are more accurate when the baby is about 18 to 20 weeks along. Hence the reason why most gender reveal parties are about 20 weeks or 21 weeks. It is important to know that these tests are not suitable for everyone, although they are reliable. Gender determination is not the main indication for carrying out these tests, so finding out the gender of your baby is a benefit if you end up getting one of these tests done for other reasons. So how can you find out the sex of your baby? Here's a few possible ways in knowing the gender of your baby. The first one, sex selection during in vitro fertilization. As the name suggests, in vitro fertilization, IVF, is an assisted reproductive technology where the mature egg, the ovum, is combined with a sperm outside of the body. As a result, an embryo is created outside of your womb, which is then implanted into your uterus, which is the baby's home. While the process is being carried out, you can ask the doctor to identify the sex of the embryo before it gets implanted into your womb. Once the identification is done through genetic screening, you have to remember that the actual chromosomes on a baby, I always used to remember it as when it's a boy because they have an X and a Y. Y! You get it, ladies? Because men sometimes drive you crazy. So they have a Y. So again, boy is Y. Now remember, with X's, 2 X's makes a girl, and that's the way that they can genetically screen and or determine for chromosomal identification. The sex selection with IVF gives the best chance to choose the sex of the baby even before you get pregnant, and the accuracy is estimated to be 99%. It is important to note that IVF has its pitfalls as well. The chances for multiple births are very high. With all my friends who have had IVF, have multiples, especially when more than one embryo is transferred. And the reason why more than one embryo is transferred is because of the fact that they really, really, really want a baby. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars. After I was born, my mom and my stepdad went through 3 rounds of in vitro, and I will say, unfortunately, I am her only daughter, but fortunately, she has 2 beautiful grandchildren, as those are the ones that I gave her. So again, it doesn't always work. It is a lot of money, and as well as you kind of want to relay it to choice, right? If you do want to determine the sex of the baby, you can tell them to only implant girls and or boys, but sometimes it's more fun to see what the sperm and the egg gravitate towards, even if you're doing IVF, so that it is still random, just like it would be if it was done in utero. This test is done to screen for possible chromosomal disorders. These are non-invasive prenatal tests. So again, if you have a family history or genetics that you already know of, chromosomal disorders including Down syndrome, further testing is done when the NIPT result is abnormal due to the diagnosis of Down syndrome. And again, Down syndrome is much more prevalent in women with advanced maternal age. This is when a woman is over the age of 35. So again, that's what it's considered, advanced maternal age, and the higher the prevalence of it is what we see. Just so that you may want to get this genetic non-invasive prenatal test done. This test is done if you have high risk. I was high risk with my second, right? Of giving birth to a baby with chromosomal abnormality. Your doctor might recommend this test if you previously gave birth to a child with chromosomal abnormalities when you were older than 35, as we talked about, in the time in which you were giving birth. This test is non-invasive, meaning it does not pose any risk to your growing baby. It is done at 10 weeks or more, and your doctor will just simply ask you to provide a blood sample. So it's nothing more than just grabbing some blood from you, the mother. The sample is sent to the lab to find out whether there is fetal DNA linked to chromosomal abnormalities. The sex of your baby can also be accurately determined during this process because they're physically looking at the chromosomes. Being sure to let your doctor know whether or not you want to find out the sex of the baby before the test is done, so they don't blurt it out and then your gender reveal party is totally ruined. Ultrasound. This is one of the most routine done prenatal tests that is done to check the well-being for the growing baby. You will ask to be lied down on a table and expose your tummy to be scanned. I have to say the gel sometimes can be a little cool. Ask them if they can warm it for you, would be even better. The ultrasound machine transmits sound waves, hence the ultrasound, meaning sound waves, through your belly to help create an image of your baby as it bounces back. If you're ever curious as to how an ultrasound works, we have an entire Pregnancy Pukeology podcast dedicated to it. It's episode 25, 3D ultrasound versus 4D. What is a sonogram? And it will go through the science behind what you're going to find and why. Now, once again, the image that it's created with these sound waves go through to your belly, and then anything that actually is hard or of substance, right, the baby, bounces back and it creates this image. As it does, the sex of your baby can be identified. Only if, and I will say only if, your baby likes to have their legs open. We can kind of take multiple views of the baby to see if their legs are open. Sometimes it can be misidentified. I was identified as a boy when I was in my mom's tummy. So when she came out, all of a sudden, boom, I had Winnie the Pooh clothes to go home in because I was a girl. While the sex of the baby can be revealed by ultrasound as early as 14 weeks, the result is more accurate at around 18 to 21 weeks of pregnancy. So let me say that one more time again. While the sex of your baby can be revealed by ultrasound as early as 14 weeks, the result is more accurate around 18 to 21 weeks of pregnancy. I will tell you, I was 14 weeks pregnant with my first child, a baby boy, and was at a show. Not even with my husband, was at a show. It was one of those Prego Expo, birthing, whatever it was. And there was an ultrasound, a 3D, 4D ultrasound place that was doing scans for free. So I said, sure, I'd love to see my baby over and over again. They go to scan it. She blurts out, "Congratulations, you're having a boy." I couldn't believe it. His legs were wide open. So I called my husband and told him, and he was devastated because he wanted to be there, obviously. So please make sure that you let them know whether or not your partner is there and whether or not you want to know or if you want to conceal it. And I will tell you too, you can pretty much figure it out, right? So if there's what I like to call the third leg Greg, right, in between the actual legs, that's a boy. So don't look if you don't want to know until the gender reveal. The position of your baby takes a little time to determine the ultrasound and the results. You may not find out the sex of your baby if your baby is facing your back, if it's curled up, if he's facing the wrong way. Again, sometimes it's difficult to see the genitalia, and I know that my son in every ultrasound was super active. So he was all over the place until he got too big for his little cage that he was in, aka his uterus little sauna, right, that was in there. Or hot tub, I should say. But then he stopped moving as much. I will say that my boy versus my girl, man, he used to kick my ribs like nobody's business. And I'm sure some of you ladies can understand that. All right, number 4, chorionic villi sampling. Like the NIPT that we talked about before, chorionic villi sampling, also known as CVS, where you can find No Menage Kids products all over the country, is a genetic test that's done to test for Down syndrome. This test is done when you are about the 10th or 12th week of pregnancy. And you should also be over 35 years of age or have a positive family history of chromosomal abnormality. The sample you provide is from the chorionic villus. It is the placental tissue. So this is invasive, okay? They basically take a big needle and go all the way through to grab the actual, the portion or the sample of the placenta. This test can also be used to accurately determine the sex of your baby. And during this test, you may bleed, you may have cramps, you may have leaking of amniotic fluid, you may go into labor, preterm labor that is, or you may experience a miscarriage. So the benefit and, look at the risk, look at the benefits. But if it's really important for you to know whether or not your child has these abnormalities chromosomally, then you can also find out the sex with that as well.
Throwing up on a Tuesday? One puke story.
I was pregnant again, but not big enough for others to know. I had a screaming toddler wanting a Cheerio toy as we walked down the cereal aisle. I bent over to grab the bargain bin bag of cereal and gave all the bags some toppings. Ew. Yeah, that's right. I threw up all over the cereals while my son was having a tantrum and running away from me. I kept puking, chasing him down the aisle. I gave up going to the supermarket completely with baby number 2 after this incident, and I love shopping online. Thanks, Louise, for this hilarious puke story. I have to say, every time I go into the grocery store and look on the cereal aisle, I will totally think of you. My hubby used to show me his love by making my morning sickness tea every morning when I was pregnant with the first. But I asked him to take the baby so I could have a quiet 30 minutes drinking it. One morning, I spilled the water, and the smell of the burnt water made me start throwing up in my own tea. The dry heaving made me start peeing. When my husband rounded the corner, he saw me in a pile of pee and puke. Now he stays out of the kitchen during my morning routine. Thanks so much, Angie, for making us laugh. Just imagine the look on your husband's face when he did that. first pregnancy, I ate as healthy as physically possible. And with the second, I was like, gee, I could really go for some sushi and a cold cut sandwich right now. You shouldn't be doing that, by the way. After having both pregnancy forbidden foods in my mouth, my body repelled them just as fast as I put them in my mouth. There was nowhere to go, so I threw up in a fake oriental plant that was next to me. As the quiet restaurant, everyone started staring at me once I sat back up. What's worse is I kept eating and cleaned nothing up. Ew, brandy it up 3. That's disgusting. But I have to say, I totally understand the quietness of some Chinese food because that's what I craved with my daughter. Do you have a hilarious puke story that you just can't wait to share? Send it to me at Pukeology, Pukeology, at nomonausea.com, nomonausea.com, or tweet me at Pukeology so we can all have a good laugh.
Tips and tricks to stop the up-chuckle that you need.
How to figure out if you've made a boy or a girl. The following are going to basically come in and it's going to shock you because there are some things that you could have been doing or that you know that you do, whether or not you made a boy or a girl. So, the 10th day after your first period, or the first day of your period, is your fertility window. So again, if you looked at when you could have potentially conceived or when you found out and then you can kind of trace back to it, you have about a 28-day cycle. If you're like me or every other woman, consider day 9 through 15 your most fertile days. They do sell ovulation tests that can tell you when you're ovulating. The way that they work is they detect your levels of luteinizing hormone, LH. Your 4 most fertile days are shown up as a surge of this actual serotonin 3 glucuride, so it's E3G. And it's an estrogen, right? So think of like an estrogen, glucuride, like mixture, which means absolutely nothing to you guys, but us in medicine, it is definitely what we actually utilize for testing ovulation. So you have the highest chances of making a boy because those are the 4 days when your eggs are fresh off the tubal train. And as stated before, that your boy sperms are faster swimmers. So they can get to the eggs a lot faster. They also have spit tests, that are now available. So if you're looking into getting pregnant or if you're interested on how it works, then check out Pregnancy Pukeology Podcast episode 14, Pregnancy Myths. It tells you all about how to make a boy or a girl and even ways that your husband can help out too. So it's really interesting, and I'll kind of go into a little teaser at the very end of it, but think back, right? Calculate back to when you were making the baby. Now that you're in your first trimester and you're trying to think of, okay, when did I make this baby? And you can see whether or not you were ovulating. If you're ovulating, you have a higher chance of making a boy. Whereas girl sperm, they tend to not be as fast, but they hang around a lot longer. So you can it can chill for about 48 hours is what we're learning inside of the body. Sometimes up to 72. But the girl sperm, they basically are floaters, right? They float on their back and they wait for the egg to kind of start to come down and then they permeate versus the boys are the crazy fast swimmers and they get up to the egg. So if the egg is fresh off the train, right, off the tube itself, you have a higher chance of having a boy versus if you were not necessarily as fertile, but you're still fertile. But if it waited a few days, then the egg will have fallen. And if you do not consummate or actually conceive, then of course you would have your period. So think of that in terms of what the actual calendar is trying to tell you. And have you ever heard people tell you that if you have morning sickness, you're having a blank, fill in the blank, boy or girl? Because I've heard it both ways as old wives' tales. Here's the science behind it. Although morning sickness is not the ultimate determinant of sex, Some have studied morning sickness at different times of the day is associated with a greater chance of one sex versus the other. And thanks to No-Monageban, a pregnancy wristband clinically proven to stop morning sickness and vomiting in seconds, you no longer have to be sick and you can enjoy your first 2 trimesters. So this necessarily wouldn't work. But a Scandinavian study found that in girls in utero excrete 9% more estrogen, thus leading to more nausea during the first trimester. Testosterone secretion steadily increases through the pregnancy with no major spikes, unlike girl embryos. So it has also been proven that the majority of hyperemesis gravidarum, which is extreme morning sickness, that usually results in hospitalization, are in patients carrying girls versus boys. So it's really interesting. If I have any HG mamas out there, my heart goes out to you. Again, try No-Monageban. It doesn't work for 100%, but it's 80% effective. And it also will help you to keep your food down, which is very important because you're losing the nutrients, right? And again, if you have to go to the hospital, if you have to have an IV, just place the band on the other side. That's the way that they are actually clinically used inside of labor and delivery rooms all over the country. And again, I wholeheartedly believe in it because of the fact of the science that works and it's natural. Do you feel like you're puking all day, every day, ladies? If you are, you might want to learn a little bit more about HG, also known as hyperemesis gravidarum, in our Pregnancy Pukeology Podcast, episode 6, called Severe Morning Sickness. Other than that, there are sciences behind if you actually have a boy or a girl. So these are real ideas to figure out whether or not you're having one sex versus the other. And I know we already talked about the 4 ways medically, but these are separate entities, 3 different separate entities that you can identify. So the first one that I'm going to go over is, does your husband wear tighty-whities or boxers? So is he a hold his junk close to his body or, let it go type of guy? Well, men who wear tighter underwear keep their sack warmer and they tend to have more girls. So if you want a boy, give your husband some boxers and he can keep his balls nice and flowing with some natural AC is the way that I look at it. Number 2, what's your favorite sex position? No, I'm not trying to be ornery just because this is, the big 5-0, right? The 50th episode. And we're talking about sex. It's true. Deep penetration will give boy sperm a head start. So if you want a boy, try doggy style, try, standing up or straddling on top, because again, you're closer up to that cervix area. And do you orgasm before or after your hubby? Now that's the third, right? So I'm going to leave this as the teaser, okay? Which, ladies, you need to come before your man in order to make a baby boy. If you want to find out more about all of this and the science behind that, this is like the teaser part. Go check out episode 14, Pregnancy Myths, where I tell you all about it. Now that you know when do you find out the sex of the baby, usually between 18 to 20 weeks, but as early as 14 weeks, or if you have chromosomal testing, you can find out as early as 10 weeks. How accurate the Chinese conception chart is, which again, I'll give it to you guys on the actual blog. And what that does is the Chinese chart actually measures the age of the woman in comparison to what month you are actually conceiving in. So there's like a 2-sided chart, I will say. And if the mother's age at conception, and let's just say 30, again, dirty 30s, right? You have a high chance of having a boy. The only 2 months, if you conceived in March or May, are stating that you have a girl. And again, I don't want to ruin anything, but Chinese chart has been actually utilized for thousands let me say that again, thousands of years. So go check it out if you're curious and find out if it's right or not. And the last thing is you found out and you know the science behind some of these old wives' tales, such as nausea and vomiting, such as, what type of boxers do your husband wear? And whether or not those signs and symptoms determine whether you're having a boy or a girl in early pregnancy. giving you the ultimate and best answers that there are for pregnancy to date. If you love Pregnancy Pukeology Podcast, let me know with 5-star ratings or hearts for likes. Don't forget to download this episode, but more importantly, share it with all your prego friends. Thanks again for listening to Pukeology Podcast, episode 50. When do you find out the sex of the baby? Until next time, I'm Dr. Pukenamo. Thanks for listening.
Pukeology Podcast, edutainment at its finest.